Hi guys, look, it's a bit of a long video, so I put the time codes up on the screen here, and if you wish to skip ahead to a particular section, then please do. Otherwise, enjoy the video. G'day guys, this video is going to be on the OTR install up to the Come Racing manifold. Now, what I wanted to do originally was run the Come Racing elbow and plumb that up to like a VR style HSV airbox. However, on the dyno, we lost about 15 or 20 horsepower when we put the snorkel on, and that was without an air filter. So my tuner recommended that I run something that was forward facing and had quite a large surface area. With that in mind, I jumped online and did some Googling, as we all do, and I found that a lot of the guys that were doing LS1 conversions in their VNs were also lying their radiator back and fitting these VT style OTRs up, and everything was fitting under their bonnets, apparently. Now, I thought about it quite a few times, and I don't see why that shouldn't work for my setup, to be honest. And what I want to do now is mock everything up so you get a really good idea of what's going to happen, and then I'll start fleshing out the build from there. First things first, the radiator is nothing fancy, as I'm sure you can tell. It's an eBay special I got for about 180 bucks, and it came with a fan and shroud as well. Now, I've run these types of ones before. I haven't had an issue with them as long as I've changed the fan, which I will do once I know how much room I have to play with in the middle here. But I'm hoping to sneak like a 16-inch spiral fan in, if possible. Alright, so I'm going to pop it out of its top rails, kick it back. I'm running new rubber grommets in the lower radiator support. And then I picked up this VCM LS1 OTR off Marketplace. It's a really good condition. Great finish on it too. Like, it looks like a factory airbox finish, and has these two little brackets on the front, which sit just on top of that upper radiator support. And then lean this one back forward. Take my trusty flat blade screwdriver and just jam it in somewhere. So that's kind of how the setup is going to go. I'll probably end up having to cut or roll this upper lip so I can close that gap up a bit more. And I might have to do the same on the bottom to try and keep it as low as possible, but we'll see how we go. Once I've sorted all that out, I can then make my straps to keep the top of it mounted nicely. And excuse the horrible drawing, but that's kind of what it's going to look like. You'll probably make it out of maybe 30mm wide by say 4 3mm thick alloy plate. And it's going to go over the mounting post on the radiator, and then I'll probably end up bolting it through where that rubber top grommet would go. So that would be all bolted up. And then the throttle body. So I've got this 10mm alloy plate, which I'm going to machine up to look like this. Cutouts, well, a single cutout for the throttle body, and then 4 holes that match up with the Come Racing throttle body. So I'll jump on the mill and I'll get that done. And then comes a really tricky part. So this is a 4-inch to 5-inch alloy transition piece. Obviously the 4-inch goes up to the OTR. But then my plan here is to make up a jig or something in the vise, not too sure yet. I want to kind of crush up the other 5-inch end and turn it into like a rectangular oval that will meet the profile of the new plate. Now, it's going to be difficult to do that and also retain the nice 4-inch thumb on the other side, because I can just see the whole thing turn into shit, to be honest. But, you know, if I have to buy a second one after I stuff this one up, so be it. And if it all really goes pear-shaped, then I'll just get someone to fabricate a nice piece out of it, which I'm trying to avoid because I want it to kind of look, you know, factory in a way, like it was pumped out in the masses, not like custom hand fabricated, if that makes sense. And yeah, hopefully once it's all done nicely, I could just get someone else to tick it onto the plate. Once all that's done, the guy that got this thing from the OTR from Marketplace gave me a few different rubber joiner pieces to play with. I mean, that one's huge, but the other ones will probably work. We'll see how we go. And then hopefully after all that, then I can work on what the fan's going to look like. And I can already tell now I'm going to have to probably use a different like universal style top radiator hose. Okay, I've tried a few different combinations, and I think this is a position I'm going to go with. Obviously, the biggest determining factor here is will the bonnet close? And it does with the position like this. Like it just sits on top of it. A few things that I was, arguing about at the start was, do I keep this gap nice and tight? But the more I look at it now, the more I want a bit of a gap in there so air can pass through and the radiator can do its job. It also kind of has to be like that because I'm actually trying to tilt the OTR like this. I've accentuated it, but like that. And that's because that outlet actually points down naturally. And I want it to kind of point up to the throttle bodies. Otherwise, it's going to be doing this dip down, and the joining piece will be kind of like bent or on the piss quite a bit. So I've tried to sort of angle it back up as much as possible whilst getting the bonnet to close. But I think that'll work all right. I just knocked it. But the other thing too here is to support the top of it, actually has these two little lugs on top of the radiator. And this bit of 10 mil square steel, if I sort of drill 2 holes in it, I can run it as a brace bar at the top, and maybe run a bit of fuel tubing over it so it has a nice bit of cushioning. The brackets at the front that came with it will work, however I'll have to chop and bend them a bit shorter because it's just a bit too long. And I want to maintain at least, I don't know, 1/2 inch gap between the filter and the top radiator support just so things can move around and a bit of air can pass through. The other thing I'm thinking about now is I'd like to, the more I can lower the radiator, the more I can kink that OTR back up. And I've chopped the lip off the top here, but I'm thinking, do I also chop the lip at the bottom? Because as you can see, it's sitting hard on that lower lip on the support and not really fully seated in the rubber grommets. So if I cut that, I can drop it and get a bit more out of it. But the next trade-off there is, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this, where the top radiator hose goes, it's getting kind of close and pointing down towards the power steering pump. And so the further I lean this thing back, the more I'm going to start to interfere with that top pulley and belt. Which isn't the end of the world, because I guess my workaround there would be, I'll probably drill a little hole and tap a couple of bolts there. I might make a little, top guard for the belt so the hose can just rest on top of that if it gets too close to the pulley. And the other thing I'm mindful too is I want to keep as much space as possible between the water pump and the radiator so I can run a decent fan. So I kind of don't want to go any further back with the radiator than that. But if I can drop it, that might help. I might give that a shot now. I cut the lip off the lower. I cut the lower lip off. It made bugger all difference, and in fact, all I did was cut off the flange that you bolt the fan shroud to. So, great job, Gus. Not the end of the world. There's a little bolt hole like under the radiator that I can make a little bracket up so I can still clamp up the fan shroud, but not my finest moment, but it just happened. And I decided to fit the fan shroud and fan that came with the actual radiator. It's just a complete junker fan, like a no-namer fan, but it does give a good indication of how much space I have to play with. So not much there. It is also sitting at about 10 mil from sitting flush, so we'll get fractionally better than that, but not much. And maybe that'll show you too. Yeah, so it's not too bad, but it has made me stop and think, and I decided to pick the fan online. So I'm going to run with a 16-inch spiral fan, the 2000 CFM fan. I know there's a 3000 CFM fan out there, but I think it pulls like 25 amps, and you need I think you need to even upgrade the wiring to run it. Like, it's a pretty serious fan. I don't think I need that much, so the 2000 CFM fan will be fine, and it'll fit inside the shroud. I just have to get the jigsaw out and cut around it when it comes in. So I decided to wait for that, because ultimately, once I know exactly where the fan's going to be, I can just lay the radiator back to suit the clearance. Otherwise, I'm just sort of guessing until then. But I've decided, whilst I'm waiting for that to come, I'm going to jump on the mill and start machining up the plate to make the adapter. Well, I had to dive deep into my drawer full of bits and pieces, but I found the right cutters to get it done. Looks pretty good. I'm going to test fit it now and then start working on the cone piece. I'm pretty stoked with the way it's come out. It matches up with the throttle bodies really nicely. All I have to do now is chamfer it properly and do the radiuses in the corners. That's looking good. I couldn't have machined too much more out of it, to be honest. I mean, by the time I bend this thing into an oval and, you know, get someone to TIG it on, it's going to get very close to that outside edge, especially in this radius here. By the time it comes out to about there, put a whirlpool on, it's going to get very close to that bolt hole. So it's going to be challenging, but hopefully it looks mint by the time it's all done. And that's the mission now, to crush this thing up without stuffing it. Okay, just a few hours later, I've come up with a plan. Now, as much as I just wanted to get this in the vise and start crushing it up and hitting it with a hammer, I decided to stop and have a bit of a think about it, and I've come up with a plan that has a bit more finesse to it, you might say. And I made this jig. That's a plate I just made before, and this is the flaring tool. It's made out of a 75mm piece of exhaust, stainless exhaust, essentially. I made these little bracings inside of it and then cut it in half so that it can separate. I then had these bit of like 25 square steel, so it can telescope but still retain its parallelness. And the idea is that I use 2 G-clamps underneath behind these supports here and then flare it out to about there, which is where I want it. And I'll show you what that looks like now. So that's what it looks like now. And then flaring it out. From there, I'm predicting that I'm going to get this sort of bell mouth out effect like this, where it can't kind of collapse above and below it enough. If that happens, I'll either have to make something else to then crush it this way, or perhaps I might be able to sort of flip the whole thing upside down in the vise and then just sort of crush it up that way with it still sort of flared out. Well, that's the plan anyway. Let's see what happens. All right, here we go. This thing is like a coiled cat. It's been pulled in that many different directions. I'm expecting to sort of just fly out of the vise at any stage. But I think I've gone as far as I can go. It's bell-mouthed in, as you can see. And that's because the circumference of the 5-inch diameter, I think, is just too big for the oval pattern I want to do on the plate. So I've had to compromise and sort of roll the lip in, because I couldn't obviously crush all that up, otherwise we start distorting even more that 4-inch diameter. So that's a compromise there. And as you can see too, I've left my 75mm spreaders on the corners there, and it's turned out to be more of a rectangle with radius edges more than anything, but I'll take it. At least it's even on both sides, and if it's not going to work, then I'm going to pretty much have to do a whole new piece. So I'll pop it out now and have a look, and yeah, hold it up against the plate. Okay, this is it. Now I have to trim out the edges to make them parallel. I'll talk about that black line in a second, but I think, look, it came out all right. It's just too big. I'll show you why. So that's kind of parallel on the plate. It's just too much circumference to do what I wanted to do with it. I mean, I could offset it a bit, so you drop it right down and get someone to do like a butt weld on that side, and then I can just do like a fillet weld up here. At least that would look good on top, and then just port the rest of it in, even though I don't think you really have to, but so I feel. Yeah, there's no other way of really doing this now. I looked online, and you can't get a 4.5-inch to 4-inch transition piece. It's either a 4 or a 5, which makes sense. So the only other step from here would be to get someone to fabricate this whole thing up out of, sheet alloy, and yeah, which sounds like time and money to me, and it's kind of not what I want. So I'm going to keep pursuing, and what I want to do now is that black line, I'm going to kink it down. So where are we? Like that. So it drops this piece down to the intake a bit better, because at the moment it's sitting parallel, and you can see the offsetness there. And what's happening is this rubber joiner piece is actually, the ribs on it are like higher than you think, and it's hitting the bonnet. So I'm going to, hopefully I can do this with, I'm going to drop it down to like that as a parallel. Where are we? Sorry, like that. And hopefully that should give me a better angle to the intake. I reckon less is more here, so I'm going to start with that and see how it goes. Alright, so I've cut it and kicked it down. I did it about maybe twice the distance that you saw before in that black line, so not a great deal, but it's definitely helped out the angle. And the bonnet closes nicely now, like it just touches, but that's alright. So the next issue now is, just take this off. Oh, sorry for the camera movement. Next issue now is that because I've chopped it, it's actually a heap wider again. So I'm gonna have to put it back in the jig and re-crush it. And hopefully I don't distort the hell out of the 4-inch section of it. Actually, I'll just try and turn it on its side so you can see. Oh, like that, see like that. That's how much I've kicked it. All right, get it back in the jig. So I'll quickly talk about this fan that I've just chopped in. I initially wanted to run the Spal 16-inch 2000 CFM fan. However, when I jumped online, the depth of the fan was about 89 mil. So from the face of the fan to the back of the motor was 89. And the fan that I was test fitting up that this came with was 85. So it was nearly, 4 or 5 mil deeper than the fan that was test fitting. That was already too deep anyway because I'm just about on the water pump. So I jumped online and I found this fan. That's the part number. It's still a Spal, obviously 16-inch fan, except it only does 1500 CFM because it's the compact series. Now, I think it's going to do just fine considering it's in a nice shroud. It's going to do a damn sight better than whatever that eBay special fan was going to do. And I've given myself 20 mil because this fan, the depth is 63 from the face to the back of the motor. So it's nice and compact. So hopefully I can lean the radiator back a fraction more or just leave it where it is and give myself a bit more space between the motor and the water pump. All right, I'll get this thing fitted up and see what the rest of it looks like. Okay, I'm calling it. That's the setup. After many openings and closings of the bonnet and, moving the radiator forwards and back, that's it. Obviously, the biggest factor here is will the bonnet close? And it does. I'll show you a quick video of that now. So it just misses it, but I'm pretty happy with it. And, I'm glad I kicked this intake down a bit. So it does have a very slight sort of drop down into the intake. And without that, it would just hit the bonnet all the time. So made the right call there. The intake does sit nicely on top of this radiator. I might have to run a bit of just rubber over this lip so that it has a bit of soft cushioning on it, but that all works well. Plenty of gap between the radiator and the intake, which is good for a bit of airflow. About a 1/2 inch, 3/4 gap between the filter and the radiator support, which is also good. What else? The water pump clearance to the fan, minimal. It's difficult to get an angle on that, but I'm glad I went with the more compact fan. The extra 20 mil would have definitely pushed it over the line. I reckon there's a bolt and the pulley are at least 20 mil away from each other, so yeah, that wouldn't have worked. And it's not just the depth either. It's that motor in the bigger one is actually a bigger diameter motor, so yeah. And what else? The top radiator hose I'll get on easy enough. I might have to make that guard up. I'll see how it looks. So I might get on to making these straps now. And before I do that, I might send this down to my mate and get him to tick it on and work some magic on it. And then I'll dress all that up, make it look a bit more professional. But yeah, looking good. I'm glad that I've got it all together. It was doing my head in last night, but I think it's going to work. Okay, so I had to dimple the outside corners of this cone piece just to sort of get a bit more clearance between the bolt hole and the cone. Otherwise, it's just going to be too difficult to weld. And I still might have to spot face a little bit of overrun onto that hole, I reckon, even once the guy welds it. And to do the dimples, I didn't want to do it, but it's actually come up all right. I had to make this another little jig up, which I'll try and hold everything here at the same time. But essentially, this is an old, what is it? Fuel pump drive gear for the cam off a 308, which I cut the corner out and put a little brace back on it. And then I got some vice grips. And then using that as like a tool, press tool, I sort of crimped it in using this dowel. Just sort of crushed it on. Yeah, came up all right. Okay, now I'm gonna take it down to get welded. Intake piece is all done. Back from the welders. Looks pretty good considering the little space I gave them to do what they had to do. Yeah, and a bit of a shout out to the guys at Race Radiators, in Dandenong. I know how busy they are, but they squeezed this job in for me. So yeah, thanks to them. And some of the welds did go into the bolt hole areas. So I chucked it back on the mill and just did like a long series 12mm end-mill spot face on them. That worked out all right. And then I gave the whole thing a bit of a Scotch-Brite and CRC polish. It looks trick. So I'm gonna get this thing fitted up now with some like high temp silicon flange sealant and keep moving. Well, those straps are relatively easy to make. Both in are looking good. I made them out of 32 by 3mm flat alloy bar from Bunnings. It's like I don't know, $15 for a meter. And so the 12mm post on the radiator, I gave it like 0.1 clearance, so it just slides over. And I found a couple of the rocker post cap heads that I had from the VR turbo motor I built. And they fit nicely in there. And running like a nylon lock nut behind it so it doesn't come loose. And still running the, I don't know what we call them, standard, rubber channel mounts for the radiator. Because that 516 cap head is obviously a lot smaller than the 12mm post it lives in, I actually put some old fuel tubing around the bolt inside that, so it has a bit more rigidity to it. And it's worked relatively quite well as a brace point for the radiator. Like, it's not going anywhere, and it has a little bit of cushioning in there, which is like perfect. I don't know if you can't see it, but yeah, it's works really well. I should also say too, it's snuck in between the channel and that. You couldn't go much wider on the alloy bar, otherwise it wouldn't work as well. I mean, there's a bit of clearance in there, but I think 3mm will be just fine. And I sorted out the top radiator hose as well. I ended up running like a McKay flexible style. There's plenty of clearance between the top hose and that power steering pulley, so I'm not worried about that at this stage. And yeah, looks all right. Actually, this is the part number 2, in case you're wondering. All right, so I might jump on to making, sorting out the brackets for the OTR now and how that's going to look on the front radiator support. I've modified the brackets that came with this intake, and before I go any further, I thought I'd just quickly talk about it. So these brackets are the standard brackets that come with this intake. They kind of fit off to the side, got a little tab on the side, and you can slide them up and down depending on where you want them on your VT. However, on a VN, the whole thing sits up way too high, so I needed to make it shorter. So what I did was, instead of chopping the top down and redoing the bolt hole somewhere different, I decided to modify the bottom bit, because this tab originally sat down an extra 3/4 of an inch further down. So I chopped that off, and then that little bit that was poking down, I then folded back at 90 and made that the bracket base. And yeah, easy to do, and it's worked out almost perfectly where I want it. And I've done the same on the other side. So what I'm going to do now is bolt the brackets on, fit the whole intake back in the car, position it where I want it centrally, and then I'll drill and tap the top radiator support to suit these brackets. All right, so I've drilled and tapped the top radiator support to suit those brackets. There's not much room in there, but just enough to get the job done. I mean, it's not going anywhere, so it's just essentially just a little location screw. It still has a good amount of half inch between the filter and the radiator support, which is good. Plenty of gap between the intake and the radiator. I put some pinch weld, I don't know if you can see it, pinch weld to sort of give it a bit of cushioning so it doesn't rub on that lip of the radiator. What else? Rubber joiner. So this is the rubber joiner that I'm pretty sure it comes with this kit, although I bought it off Marketplace, so I don't really know. But essentially this kit came with, these were on the ends of it. I cut them off, so it's obviously got an option there to cut it down if you want to. But with the cut down, it fits absolutely perfect once all that's fitted up. And before I go and final fit everything here, I had an idea that I've had for a couple of days now, and it's one of those ideas that once I thought about it, I just had to make it happen. And that was, I'm not thrilled about the idea of potentially a lot of air coming up past the radiator and going into the bay and not going through the radiator. So I mocked up a cardboard template that essentially went over the top of the radiator and then down like this to help duct the air, not just through the radiator here, but also duct it around and then use all the space in there to go through the radiator. So I drew it up online with my template, and then I got a company to laser cut it for me. And this is the air duct. I don't know what you want to call it, cover. And you're gonna have to use your imagination here because it's bolted down. But essentially this strip will lie under the intake there, and then you'll just see these bits either side going down. And I'll probably end up having to sort of profile this a little bit to suit the curvature of the radiator support. And then I'll probably put one or two little screws there. And I might use this tab up the top here, put a sneaky little M4 in there so you can't really tell. But I think it's gonna look, it's gonna look really good when it's done. And also hopefully perform better having it there than not having it there. So I'll spend a few hours now and try and get this fitted up. All right, I've skipped over the whole folding of the air duct because I'm sure you get the idea of it. It's just 2 or 3 folds on a piece of alloy sheet. Plus this video is getting really long now, so I thought I'd cut to the chase and show you the good stuff. And here it is, everything's fitted up. All right, this is it. First impressions. So, I think it's come out a lot better than I initially thought it was going to be honest. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, but it's definitely, it's definitely ticked the box of what I wanted to achieve. I mean, it doesn't look too flashy. It doesn't look too, in your face either. It just looks functional and integrated. That's the word. Like, it looks like it's part of the bay, which is what I was hoping to get out of it, as well as also being functional. But I'll start at the top. So the intake piece, I'm glad when I made that, I angled it down, because that whole flow down to the front of the intake now works really well. Looks good, it's not too sharp, the dog leg's not too bad. And the bonnet closes, I'll just show you that now. Yeah, so it just kisses the top of that rubber ridge, which is fine. Intake is, nice and sturdy whilst having a bit of movement, so the engine can flex and do its thing. What else? Most of the intake work is done inside the front bar area up here. Where are we? Whoops. Yeah, so still a nice big open space in there to draw cool air. That loom you see hanging down there, that's actually the passenger headlight loom that from factory runs on top of this support lip. It just looks really bad, so I'm gonna tuck it under there. I don't know why this is short too. It just does this, it does my head in. But I've got to fix all that later. And yeah, so the air duct. So look, for something I did a quick template out of cardboard and drew it up online, and then someone laser cut it for me, I think it's come out really well. I mean, this is the first trial of it, so I did make some mistakes though along the way. So this fold here is about 10 mil too short, and you can see that down here. I'm just shy of coming to the front of that support, so I've changed my drawing to suit that measurement, and there's a few little things around to jiggle around. Like I would have rather have made this cut a bit nicer, so that looks a bit more, I don't know, aesthetically pleasing, you might say. And this cover here is actually made out of 1.2 alloy sheet, and I think it's just a bit too flimsy. It needed to be 2 mil, which I didn't want to do because it's harder, obviously, to bend 2 mil, but not that much harder. But yeah, anyway, I've changed that also to 2 mil in the drawing, and I've drawn up some infill pieces to do this. I just think it looks heaps better if I cap it off and sort of box the whole radiator in. And so I've ordered a new center piece and the left and right end caps, and I'll get someone to tick them on, and that way it'll look really nice and schmick. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Next up, I'm going to do a video on the transcooler installation. I mean, I don't want to stick the cooler back in front of all my hard work at the front here, so I need to find a new place to put it, and I'm going to have to probably buy a smaller one because the one I have at the moment is just way too big. But other than that, this thing's not far off starting up. I mean, there's little loose ends inside the engine bay. Like, I've got to still find a catch can, but you know, just for now, I'll probably just pull the tape off and let it vent once I first started. So yeah, little bits and pieces, but yeah, not far away now. It's been on the stands for, I reckon, close to a year. So need to get my act into gear and get this thing happening. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Bye.